out of all of the 50 great states in the United States, the fourth largest by population is the state of New York. This state is by far the largest in the northeastern region. The reason this state is so large is because of this one city that you probably never heard of. It's not like it's the largest city in the country or anything, but this city is huge and consists of over 8 million people alone, which is over 40% of the state's population. So when talking about how much this city influences this state, it's not even a question. The city and the state have the same name, for crying out loud. But this city is not the only thing in this state, as New York is relatively large area-wise for Northeast standards. And yet all one could hear of is the city that makes up just the teeny little area in the bottom corner. There is an entirely different world beyond the city of New York, so different that maybe, just maybe, it should be its own state. So what if upstate New York became its own state? The first step towards unraveling this mystery is finding out how the state of New York got this shape in the first place. So here's a quick minute of history. New York started as a string of Dutch colonies along the Hudson River, most notably New York City and Albany. After this, the British had control, then the Americans. However, many of the boundaries were established during British rule. First is the border between New York and Connecticut. Efforts to create a border began during Dutch rule, but once the English took over, there was more traction to create a formal border between the two now English colonies. At this point, New York City, Long Island, and pretty much every settlement along the Hudson River belonged to New York, while the settlement of Connecticut consisted of towns such as Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford. Eventually, a settlement was reached in 1688, where the modern-day border was created, following along the Hudson River Valley, creating the shape we see today. Next is the boundary between New Jersey and New York. Now, throughout the time the English had control, there was a small dispute, but it was finally agreed that the boundary should be on the Hudson up to the 41-degree mark. Then, a straight line from there to the Delaware River at the 41-degree 21-minute mark. Then there was the Pennsylvania border, which was eventually ratified to be at the 42-degree line in the 1780s, after the American Revolution. Although Pennsylvania did try to sneak away with the 43-degree line, but they failed. New York would eventually gain the western area through the Phelps and Gorham Purchase. I think I said that right. Maybe. And the Holland Land Purchase. There was also this region called the Erie Triangle that New York wanted, but didn't get. So the edge of that place makes up the western border. Then there's the border with Canada. So after that, there's no New York there. Now the land known as Vermont kind of used to belong to the state of New York, kind of. The people there didn't really see it that way, and eventually got their way in becoming their own state. Then we moved down to the final dispute with Massachusetts. This dispute got so bad that there was soon violence between the two sides in the 1760s. Soon after this, a boundary was decided, although it wouldn't be fully agreed upon for a couple hundred more years. Now we know why New York is New York, we should probably decide who is separating from who. This would probably be the upstate area, since there are fewer people. What I see as the best split line would be giving New York City, Long Island, and the two counties north of it, Westchester and Rockland counties. Meanwhile, the rest of the state would belong to the new upstate region. I feel as if everything under this line is more city, and everything above is more rural. Now, who would be called New York? Well, that would probably be the city. Meanwhile, the northern region would be given a new name. Through prior upstate secession ideas, I've seen this region get the name of New Amsterdam and Buffalo. These just don't fit. New Amsterdam is just another name of New York City, which wouldn't make any sense because New York City isn't even in this new state, and Buffalo just doesn't have the same ring as the name Niagara, the name I'm going to give this new state. Now that we have our two states, we can compare the statistics and of course sports of these two new regions. First is population. This was easy to get as the new New York now only has 9 counties, with 5 of these counties all being grouped up together as New York City. So adding up the populations of New York City, along with the counties of Nassau, Suffolk, Westchester, and Rockland, gives us a total population of 12,279,423 people, according to the World Population Review. Subtracting that from New York's initial population would then give us an upstate population of 7,189,809. This would most definitely send New York down a few pegs when compared to other states, with New York being moved from 4 to 6. Meanwhile, the new state of Niagara would be the 16th largest in terms of population. Next, we're going to look at the area, with there being two types of area: land area and total area. The total area includes water territory and land area doesn't. The land area is going to be what I'll be using today, as most people can't live on water. According to the US Census, New York would plummet all the way down to being the 49th largest state at a land area of about 2,100 square miles, only being larger than Delaware and Rhode Island. Meanwhile, the new state of Niagara would only be a single spot lower than the original New York, at 31, with a land area of just over 4,500 square miles. Since we now have population and area, we can calculate density. Let's start with New York, which would now have a density of 5,846.45 people per square mile, making it the densest state in the Union, with second place New Jersey not even close at only 1,200 people per square mile. Next is Upstate, which would have a density of 159 people per square mile, making it the 21st densest state in the Union. Now we can compare GDP. This metric was hard to find as I looked at numbers from many sources, ranging New York State's GDP anywhere from 1.5 trillion to 2 trillion. Some real GDP, others domestic. But I found a source that measured in real GDP in BEA.gov. With this data, it was safe to say that New York would not change spots, still holding the number 3 spot at $1.367 trillion. Meanwhile, upstate New York would still hold a respectable spot, being the 20th largest economy in the United States, with a real GDP of $395.96 billion. So how well off would the people of New York be? Well, it wouldn't be bad, as New York would now have a GDP per capita of $111,327, making it go from the richest states to being even richer. Comparing it to Niagara, this new state would have a GDP per capita of $55,072, which is still in the top half at 24. Now, let's visualize the population patterns between the two new states. Let's start with New York, which has, well, New York City and its suburbs, including Yonkers, which is now the second largest city in New York, with a population of 200,000. The third largest city would be New Rochelle, with 84,000. Fourth would be Mount Vernon at 69,000. And Brentwood at 65,000 would be the fifth largest city. All of these cities are suburbs close to the big city, with the entire state being incredibly dense, with the only areas not being completely urban being the furthest northern areas and the eastern tip of Long Island. Now, there is the state of Niagara, with the new largest city being Buffalo, with a population of 275,000 people. The next largest city is Rochester at 200,000. The third largest city would be Syracuse at 140,000 people. Fourth would be Albany at 100,000, and the fifth largest city would be Cheektowaga at 76,000. If I mispronounce any of these names throughout the entire video, I am sorry. 4 of these cities are independent cities with their own metropolitan areas, showing that although upstate is less dense, there is an assortment of cities across this new state. However, there are sparse regions in the upper middle and lower middle areas of the state. Okay, so what do these people like? Well, let's look at what they watch. There are professional sports teams in both of these states. In baseball, the New York Mets play in Queens while the Yankees play in the Bronx, both in New York City. Next are the New York Knicks and the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets play in Brooklyn, obviously, and the Knicks in Manhattan. For hockey, the New York Rangers play in Manhattan, and the New York Islanders play in a Long Island suburb called Elmont. In Major League Soccer, the New York City Football Club plays in the Bronx, although the New York City Red Bulls, another football club, do represent New York, but they play in New Jersey. The same can be said for New York's two football teams, the Jets and the Giants, who also represent New York but play in New Jersey. Going to the other state of Niagara, they have pro sports teams too. Both the Buffalo Bills and Buffalo Sabres from the NFL and NHL respectively are in the Buffalo area. The Bills do play in Orchard Park, a suburb of Buffalo. Both the Bills and Sabres have the representation of the new state of Niagara on their side, possibly strengthening their fan bases. Now, let's look at the other allegiances the people here may have. The original New York state was politically a solid blue state, while the newer New York couldn't be any bluer. Looking upstate, things get more interesting. Using data from the 2020 election, we can find that upstate New York would have gone blue. However, the difference here is only by 100,000. So, the state of Niagara would probably have been a swing state. This would make the feasibility of the state to be incredibly murky. Obviously, something huge would have to happen to make New York split, since I'm pretty sure the two sides are content with being each other for now. But if there ever was a desire to split, there would probably be opposition from Republicans and Democrats alike, given Niagara's swing state status. After all of the numbers have been crunched, we have two states, one small city-state with seemingly the power of the world in its hands. Meanwhile, to the north is a vast landscape that seems to mark just above average in just about everything. One side would resemble the heart of the Northeast and all of its culture. Meanwhile, the other would likely lean towards the other Rust Belt states in a cultural sense, with strong ties towards cold winters and a hard-working class. But what do you think of this split? Although this would likely never happen, imagine what would happen if the split ever occurred. What do you think would happen? Comment below, and while you're there, like and subscribe for more sports and geography content. Thank you and have an amazing day.